So you want to own a wind turbine, and on paper, the timing looks perfect. Building wind power today costs less than half of what it did 15 years ago. The price has fallen faster than almost any gadget you can think of. And wind is now one of the cheapest ways to make new electricity anywhere on the planet. A single unit of power, the kind you see listed on your electricity bill, can be made by a good wind farm for only about 3 or 4 cents. But here's the strange part. One major study, looking at nearly 25 years of wind projects, found they created almost no lasting jobs in the communities that actually host them. Not just a few, but none you could even measure. And in some places, once you add everything up, a turbine can cost more each year than the fuel money it actually saves. The economics of wind are not what you've been told. And once you see why, you will never look at those calm spinning blades the same way again. So before we go any further, if you like videos that take the shiny version of a story and quietly take it apart, do me a quick favor and hit subscribe. I dig into a new one of these every week, and it genuinely helps the channel. Right, let's get into it. First, let's be fair to wind, because the good side of the story is completely real. Take the United States as an example. Back in 1990, wind made less than 1% of the country's electricity. By 2022, it was making more than 1 unit in every 10, more than 1 in 10 of all the power running through homes and factories. And the same story is playing out across Europe and Asia. The cost of building it has truly collapsed. For the same amount of power, putting up a wind farm now costs less than half of what it did in 2010. And the cheapest projects cost only about a third of what the most expensive ones do. Researchers tracked this same drop across 43 different countries, and a big part of the saving came from something surprisingly simple. Engineers in Denmark and China started building taller towers and longer blades, bigger machines that reach higher, calmer winds and sweep a much larger circle of air. Far more electricity for not much more money. So the headline almost writes itself. Wind is cheaper, wind is growing, wind is winning. And yet, for the people who actually own these machines, the reality is far messier than the brochures admit. A normal commercial turbine today, the big kind you see standing in a field, whether that field is in Germany or China, costs somewhere between roughly $2.5 and $4 million to build and stand up. At that size, the numbers are serious, but they're workable. A big company putting up dozens of them gets to spread all the expensive shared costs, the giant cranes, the new access roads, the heavy connection to the power grid across a huge amount of power. So the bigger the project gets, the cheaper each individual turbine becomes. But here's the catch, and it's a brutal one. If you are just one person trying to put up a single turbine on your own land, that curve does not bend in your favor. It bends savagely against you. A small turbine made for a single home can cost around 7 times more for every bit of power it makes than a big commercial one. A little rooftop-sized machine can easily run you $35,000, and it produces electricity at a price that no real business would ever accept. And this is where the most important number in the whole video comes in. Energy researchers estimate that earning back the money you spend on a small home turbine can take anywhere from 6 to 30 years. And which end of that range you land on depends entirely on where you live, how windy your spot is, how much you pay for electricity, and whatever help your government still offers. Now actually sit with what a 30-year payback really means. Most turbine warranties don't last anywhere near that long. Most home loans don't either. You would be betting that a machine full of spinning blades and gears standing out in every single storm will outlive the very loan you took out to buy it, and that electricity prices will climb enough over those decades to make the whole gamble worth it. But hold on, because even the cheap, large-scale projects, the ones that are supposed to prove wind works, have a problem hiding underneath. That famous low price everyone quotes is a worldwide average, and averages hide an awful lot. Depending on where you actually build, the real cost of wind on land swings from under 3 cents a unit all the way up to nearly 9, and wind out at sea, the kind politicians love to announce on a windy harbor, runs from about 7 cents a unit to almost 16. That top figure is roughly 5 times the cheapest wind on land. So whenever someone tells you wind is cheap, the honest reply is always another question. Which wind and where? And it gets sharper still. On a grid that already runs on cheap natural gas, some experts have calculated that the money a new turbine saves on fuel each year can actually be less than what it costs to build and run that turbine over its life. A single big turbine might cost around $3.5 million to put up. And the gas it lets you stop burning may simply not be worth that much. In plain words, the fuel you stop using is worth less than the machine you bought to stop using it. And one research group pushed even harder, arguing that wind out at sea can cost society about 3 times more than the benefits it actually delivers. That's a contested claim from a single think tank, but it tells you just how fiercely these numbers are still being fought over. So, if the economics are this shaky, why is wind booming in so many countries? And if you want the clearest possible answer, look at Germany, because what's really holding the whole thing up is going to surprise you. Germany is the textbook success story. In 2025, it added more new wind power than in almost any year in its entire history. Its wind on land grew by more than half in a single year, one of the biggest expansions the country has ever seen. On the surface, that looks like a pure, free market victory, but almost none of it happened on its own. Decades ago, Germany passed a set of laws that promised every single wind owner a fixed, guaranteed price for their electricity, locked in for 20 full years. That one decision is what turned wind from a science experiment into a real industry, because for the first time, investors knew exactly what they would earn every year for 2 decades. Without that 20-year guarantee, the modern German wind industry, at anything close to this size, simply would not exist. And Germany is not unusual. From Europe to China, almost every great wind boom was built on the very same foundation: government guarantees, not the free market alone. So a booming wind country is not proof that wind pays for itself. It is proof that wind pays beautifully when a government quietly agrees to carry the risk. Then there's the promise made to every small town where these turbines go up: jobs. Wind projects are sold to rural communities as engines of employment, a way to bring work back to quiet places. The reality is far thinner. That major study, covering nearly 25 years, found no measurable effect on jobs in the very communities that host the turbines. And remember, that's about the lasting local jobs a wind farm leaves behind, not the busy few months of construction. An earlier estimate suggested that a fairly large wind farm, the kind that can power tens of thousands of homes, might create only around 50 permanent positions once it's finished. The construction crews arrive, they spend a busy few months raising the towers, and then they pack up and leave, and the town mostly stays exactly as it was before. But here's the number that should really stop you before you spend a single dollar. Think about going out to sea. The giant turbines that grab all the headlines from Europe to East Asia. People assume the eye-watering price tag, $12 to $20 million per turbine, is the expensive part. It isn't. Once you add the foundation sunk deep into the seabed, the cables running for kilometers along the ocean floor, and the long connection all the way back to shore, the turbine itself quietly becomes the cheapest piece of a far, far more expensive system. And that's the whole lesson in a single image. Owning a wind turbine is not a simple, feel-good green investment. It is a complicated financial bet where the location, the size of the project, the access to the grid, the government support, and the terms of your loan all have to line up at exactly the same time. Change just one of those things and the entire plan can quietly fall apart. And so if you're still tempted, here is what you actually need to know before you ever hand over a cent. A home's electricity use varies wildly around the world, roughly 3,000 to 4,000 units a year across much of Europe and Asia, and up to about 10,000 in the United States. To cover most of that with your own wind, you'd be putting somewhere between roughly $25,000 and $120,000 on the table before a single subsidy. Whether that money ever finds its way back to you depends entirely on how windy your land really is, what you pay for power, what help your government still gives, and the loan you can manage to get. There is no guarantee anywhere in it. So strip away the green marketing, the proud announcements, and the pretty photos of blades against a blue sky, and what you are really left with is a spreadsheet. The turbine doesn't care about your good intentions. It only answers to 2 things: wind speed and arithmetic. And on most pieces of land on Earth, the arithmetic is brutal.